Christian. I think you can prove it. If you can't prove it, then you err on the side of caution.
That was Jeb Bush suggesting his plan for sorting Syrian refugees out, which ones are Christian, which ones aren't. Joining me here to talk about the political fallout from the Paris attacks is former senator and member of the 9/11 Commission, Bob Kerrey, Congressman Marsha Blackburn, Farah Pandith of the Council on Foreign Relations, and radio show giant Hugh Hewitt. Thanks, one and all, for being here. I have to ask you, Senator, Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz saying Christian refugees should be taken in because they are being slaughtered and they are in a more dire strait than others. What do you think?
They're all being slaughtered. I mean, ISIS is killing more Muslims than Christians at the moment. So, look, I think the American concern about security is a real concern. I think there's a way to take refugees in without violating our core principles. But I think there needs to be some heightened security. And the rhetoric around it, however, is a little disconcerting. But when it comes to killing people, ISIS is a greater threat right now to Muslims than they are to Christians.
Congressman, you obviously supported the House bill basically stopping the flow of refugees in from Syria. Putting a pause on place.
Right.
How do you, I mean, a few months ago, we were also taken by the image of that little Syrian boy who had drowned in the Mediterranean, and now we're saying to his family, sorry, you can't come in.
Absolutely. Everyone is very concerned about this, and rightfully so. And many of us belong to congregations and churches that have done a tremendous amount of work in this area working with refugees. Here is the issue. Right now, it is impossible to vet who is coming out of Syria and who is seeking to come. Many have falsified documents. We know that. So it's important for us to put a pause in place, be sure the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which, by the way, has not filed a report with Congress since 2013, so that we know who is coming into this country. Right now, we don't know whether it is people coming across the border illegally, like the 2 family units that were Syrians that were caught this week in the Laredo sector.
Well, I think they turned themselves
or
in.
it is somebody in Honduras. We had 6 that were apprehended there. So you've got the illegal alien and the refugee. It all comes through ORR. ORR needs to be halted until we get some protections in place.
The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum and other Jewish groups have expressed concern about this legislation, and a lot of them have cited polling from the era of World War II, 1939 Gallup poll. Should the U.S. government admit 10,000 Jewish refugee children from Germany? Yes, 30%, no, 61%. And there are those who say this is a false comparison here.
Well, every comparison is legitimate. There was a comparison to the Vietnamese 130,000 refugees who arrived with Operation New Arrival after Saigon fell, and we absorbed that. But the problem here, the context here, is the president's rhetoric. Bob mentioned that the president's rhetoric and the Republican rhetoric. 5 words now define this administration: leading from behind, JVs, contained. And the problem is that those 5 words add up to failure. So nobody trusts the president to process the refugees. We are a welcoming country, 130,000 Vietnamese. I talked to Ted Koppel this week. He is the son of German refugees to England. We have an incredible Persian population in Beverly Hills, California, where I live near there.
In my district.
Your district. And so we are very welcoming, but this administration has failed at the IRS, at the VA, at every level in Syria, so no one has confidence that they can vet.
When people talk about defeating ISIS, what do you think?
So I think it's really important that we all understand that it's necessary to look at the physical war. Of course it's necessary, but we need to broaden our sense of what is necessary. Looking at the ideological components is central. We need a strategy that is integrated. Why? Because we have to look at how people are getting recruited. And Jake, it's far bigger than ISIS. The ideological threat is global, and it is preying upon nearly 1 billion young Muslims under the age of 30. You were just talking about words. Words matter. This refugee crisis, the way we are talking about these issues, ricochets around the world, Jake. I remember being in Cambodia, talking to young kids in the jungle of Cambodia who happen to be Muslim, asking me whether the preacher in Gainesville, Florida, who had 50 people in his church and was going to burn the Quran represented our nation. So what we say here in our country makes a difference all around the world. And that phraseology, the lexicon, how we think about ourselves is really critical. It's critical to this fight, and it's critical to the larger
Sarah,
thing.
I think also leadership matters tremendously, and our president has shown himself incapable of leading in this fight. This week we had Putin and Hollande who were leading in the fight against ISIS, and a president who seems very timid of taking ISIS and radical Muslim extremism on. He can't even say the words.
Senator Kerry, you know something about war. How many troops do you think it would take to defeat ISIS?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer. Actually, I'm not capable of answering, but that's the question we should ask. I quite agree. It's got to be more than just a physical war. But if it's not a physical war, you're not going to defeat them. You're not going to retake Mosul and Raqqa and Ramadi by bombing. You just aren't. We didn't win in Europe by just bombing. We landed troops, and I think it's going to take an international force to get it done, but that's exactly the question that needs to be asked, and that's exactly the question that needs to be answered, and then present the bill. Maybe it's too expensive. Maybe Americans aren't going to support it. I don't know, but whatever the strategy is, you will not defeat ISIS without troops on the ground. You're not going to retake Mosul.
You mean more than 50,000 special
I don't know what
forces.
the number is. I would actually...
I mean, I'm sorry, 50. You mean more than 50 special ops. You mean tens of thousands of
And I would use the Powell Doctrine. Whatever the number is, multiply it by 2. Don't divide it by 2. Whatever the number is, multiply it by 2. Give us the full cost. I think the American people will support it, but it's the only way you're going to defeat them.
Hugh, I don't hear a lot of Republicans, except for some that are like 0% in the polls, calling for troops in Iraq or Syria to defeat ISIS.
I did a dozen interviews with Republican candidates this week. They are divided about Russia. They are divided deeply about the Iranian complement here. And, of course, Lindsey Graham is leading the way for a troop commitment. I think Marco Rubio is open to that. It will come down to a debate that we're going to have on December 15th, and that will be one of the 4, I think, key questions. Are you for putting ground troops in coalition or alone? Because, as the senator pointed out, that is the question. Winning is the question right now.
Yeah.
But you can't
You have
win
to
it.
win it.
You cannot
You've got to
win
have
it.
a strategy
You
first,
have to
though.
retake Raqqa. You have to retake Mosul. Somebody tell me if you think you can retake Raqqa and Mosul with bombs. You cannot.
Thank you so much to all of you. Really appreciate it. Up next, a surprise bestseller in France this week. What book is selling out in the wake of the terrorist attack? We'll tell you after the break.